Welcome to the Real Estate Investing School podcast. I'm your host, Joe Jensen. Our guest today is Jeff Breglio. Now, Jeff has been involved with over 5,000 real estate transactions. He's been doing this for over 24 years. He's the owner of REI Title, Breglio Law, REI Master U. He's an attorney, an agent, a lender, investor. He could go on for hours building out his resume here. But needless to say, he knows a thing or two about real estate investing from almost every angle, which is really unique and exciting. So we're stoked to have you on the show, Jeff. Glad you're here.
Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny. So the way that we actually met is I was doing my first subject to purchase where I buy it, leaving the existing mortgage in place. And at first I just was going to do it on my own and figure it out. And I was like, man, I really need to get an attorney involved who just, at least somebody who's been there before. Right. And I called every attorney I could find in town and none of them knew what I was talking about. Some were like, oh, I did a seller finance once, or I don't know what that is, or I can't help you with that. And no one knew what I was talking about. I was like, I'm going to have to just do this on my own. And I ended up connecting with someone on Facebook who referred me to you. And as soon as we talked, I was like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. So I was glad you got involved.
Thank you. I think when it comes to seller financing transactions, there are certainly a lot of legal issues involved in those transactions, just like in real estate in general. But I mean, there's additional mortgages or promissory notes that are created in different ways to structure the deal that can get pretty legalese. But most attorneys in their day jobs would never run into a seller financing transaction because they don't deal with typical retail transactions. They do essentially bigger projects, developments, and that sort of thing. So you're not going to find really many lawyers who are experienced in seller financing transactions unless that lawyer also happens to be a real estate investor.
Yeah, and that's what's unique about you. You personally have done a ton of investing as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, for 25 years.
What's kind of been your
1999?
Wow, that's awesome. What's kind of been your strategy or your style? What's been your focus on how you invest?
It's absolutely evolved over time, and I think it needs to evolve over time.
Yeah.
When I first started, I was doing flip projects, and I did all the work myself.
Okay.
From tear out to fixtures to plumbing to drywall to painting to cabinets to finish work. I actually learned how to do all of that, and I spent a lot of time rehabbing my own flip projects.
Wow.
And at the time, I thought this would be a great way to save money. This was in the early 2000s. There weren't a lot of educators out there. I had an experienced investor kind of as my first guide or coach. But really, there was very little out there as far as education. And there's really no one out there telling us how to do it or how to do it well or how to protect ourselves in the transaction. And then I realized after my first couple of projects that if I calculated the number of hours that it took me to do all the rehab, I ended up making like 80 cents an hour to do that work.
That should turn on my time.
A smart way to do a flip project when my time is better spent doing other things, like finding the next deal or securing financing for the next deal. I didn't need to actually do my own projects. So the first thing I learned was to hire contractors and how to work with contractors. The second thing that big thing that I changed early on was in 25 years ago, we didn't know about hard money. There were hard money lenders, but not a lot of them. They didn't really market. There was no internet, so you couldn't Google search anything.
Right.
And so when I bought a flip project, I used conventional financing.
Even to flip it.
I was like, well, yeah, I actually used a conventional loan packet, submit your W-2s and your tax returns and the name of your firstborn child to get that bank loan. And we used bank loans for flips because we didn't know any better.
Sure.
And even one of my first seller financing transactions, I sold on seller financing terms to another investor. I was moving and didn't want to handle the rental property. So I sold it seller financing. And at that time, the investor that I sold it to had far more experience than I did. And neither one of us knew about an all-inclusive note and deed. We didn't know what paperwork was required to make this transaction happen.
Let's actually dig into that a little bit. I
Yeah,
know there's
sure.
so many ways we could go in this. And that's something you set up when we did the deal we just did for me as well. Will you explain what that is and why that's different than a normal closing?
So in a seller finance transaction, to buy a property, to buy any real estate, you're going to need money.
Right.
You got to pay for it. If you're buying something, you need money to pay for it. So you need money to buy the house, and you could do it like I did in the old days and get a conventional loan. Not worth it. You can get hard money and finance it through a private lender and pay probably very large interest rates.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can have the seller help finance your purchase of the property. And in these kinds of situations, instead of going to a bank or a private lender to secure the funds to buy the property, you just talk to the seller. The seller owns the house, and he either owns the house with equity, right? So they own it. There's equity in the property above their mortgage, or they have a mortgage on it. So their current home is financed with a mortgage and their own equity. So when you go to purchase the house, if you take over their mortgage payment, that secures part of the purchase price in a loan because that loan is already in place on the house. And then any seller equity, you can either cash out the sellers of their equity, or they can turn around and loan you some of that equity. So instead of you bringing cash to close as a down payment, the seller's just financing that out of his equity, and you end up making payments, monthly payments to the seller, no differently than you'd make payments to a bank to pay for the mortgage on the property. So it's a way to get into deals without conventional loans or expensive hard money loans. And there's no qualifying. You typically don't submit any paperwork to the sellers.
Yeah,
There's
whatever,
no
just whatever they're comfortable with. If they like
whatever they're
it.
comfortable with. All your terms, like the interest rate, that's negotiated with the seller. So you're not subject to what a hard money lender is going to charge you or what the market rate is at a bank. You can negotiate a much lower interest rate with the seller. On the seller side, they really like it because, one, it does help them sell a house in a tight market, which currently most of the United States is in a buyer's market. Currently. And so sellers need to be creative in ways to get their house sold. And providing financing to a buyer saves the buyer a lot of trouble. So it helps sell their house. And the seller can make more money over time because they're now a bank and they're making interest on whatever they've loaned to you.
Yeah, it's
So it
so
can be
cool.
a
It opens
win-win
up so
situation.
many doors.
Yeah.
So explain how the all-inclusive trust deed plays a role in that.
Okay. Let's just take an example that there's a house for $500,000. That's what you and your seller have negotiated as a fair purchase price.
Mm-hmm.
They currently have a $300,000 mortgage. So that means they've got $200,000 of equity. So in a typical closing, you would bring $500,000 in either cash or loan, some way.
Right.
And the seller then would get that $500,000. They'd pay off their mortgage and they'd keep the rest, the $200,000 spread, their equity. In a seller financing transaction, I can negotiate with the seller and say, hey, seller, instead of me going to get, putting 10% down and getting a bank loan, how about I give you 10% down? So $50,000 we're going to give to the seller as a cash down. Now, if you're savvy and you understand in this current market, if you're going to go get a conventional loan, you're probably going to be putting at least 20% and possibly 30% down just to get a conventional loan.
For an investment property.
Or an investment property, a non-owner occupied investment property.
Sure.
And if you go to a hard money lender, you're going to pay 12% and maybe a couple of points.
Mm-hmm.
And most hard money lenders don't loan long term. So if this is a rental property, that doesn't work. So you say, seller, how about I give you $50,000 cash down? That leaves $450,000 left over, right? We can do a wrap note and deed, essentially a new mortgage for $450,000. And our seller, you're going to be the lender on this note. So I'm going to owe you $450,000. Does that make sense? And the seller's going to go, yeah, of course that makes sense. the purchase price is $50,000. You're giving me $50,000 in cash down right now, and then I'm gonna loan you $450,000 for the rest of the purchase price, and that's great. And now that looks like a regular loan or a regular mortgage, right? Just a $450,000 mortgage. But a wrap is different than a regular mortgage. The way a wrap works is it includes and is wrapped around an underlying mortgage. That's the $300,000 mortgage that's in the seller's name that's already tied to the house. So when I go to pay off my $450,000 loan to the seller, because it's this very specific kind of note and deed, an all-inclusive is what we call it, because it's a special note and deed, from that $450,000 that I pay off to the seller has to use that money to pay off their underlying mortgage first. So the $300,000 mortgage gets paid off first, and then if there's anything left over, and in this case it's about $150,000, then that money would go to the seller as the rest of their equity that they financed when I pay it off.
Mm.
So essentially, an AIT is AITD, or all-inclusive trust deed, or wrap note and deed. Those are all sort of synonymous terms. Different people call it different things. But it's a way of financing the purchase of the property around or over another mortgage that stays in place. And when I make payments, the monthly payment on my $450,000 wrap note to the seller, let's say that payment is $3,500. From that monthly payment, the seller is going to take some of it and make the underlying mortgage payment. Let's say it's $2,100. So from my monthly payment, the underlying mortgage is getting paid. There's going to be a little bit of a spread. That's interest that goes to the seller and their principal that they get to keep above the underlying mortgage, and they're making cash flow. So not only did they sell their house, they got their $50,000 in cash. Now they've got consistent, regular monthly income, and maybe that's a benefit to the seller. Rather than getting all their cash up now, they just spread it out over time, and they get taken in payments.
So is there a difference between subject to and seller financing, or is it kind of like roses and flowers, where all flowers, all roses are flowers, but not all flowers are roses? Like, are all subject to seller financing, but not all seller financing is subject to?
The words subject to, wrap, and all-inclusive, those are used interchangeably, and it can get confusing. When I teach this, and I teach seller financing transactions, I teach that there are three kinds of seller financing transactions. The first one we call the golden nugget of all deals. Okay. This is where you find a seller with no mortgage. They own the property free and clear. So there's no underlying bank to worry about. And so you've got this house, it's $500,000, there's no mortgage on it, and the seller simply becomes a bank. Mm-hmm. And they're going to finance $400,000 for whatever it is, whatever cash down they want, they finance the rest in a regular note and deeds or a regular mortgage. And it's going to act and look like any other mortgage. We make monthly payments to the seller keeps that, keeps the interest. And then when I want to pay it off, I just pay it off in full. So I call those a true seller financing situation, because there's no underlying mortgage, there's no underlying bank. There's just a buyer, a seller, and the seller also happens to be a bank and do the loan.
They are now, at least, right?
They are now. Before, they become a bank. Yeah, that's right. Yep. Then the other two types of seller financing are situations in which you do have an underlying mortgage. So the seller has a mortgage on the property already. They don't own it free and clear. So in this situation, there's one kind of transaction that I call subject to. And what I mean by a subject to transaction, I mean a deal in which either the seller has no equity in the house. So the house is worth just what they owe or less. It could be underwater. So there's no equity to the seller. Or you cash out the seller all of their equity at closing. So there's nothing left owing to the seller after closing. And then you just assume or take over the mortgage payments in a subject to deal. So it's really quite nice, because in this situation, either the seller has no equity or you're cashing them out of their equity at closing, and you simply take over their mortgage payments.
Yeah, because then the only lien, the
wherever
only
they are.
payment is just whatever the existing
Whatever
mortgage.
whatever their mortgage statement says you have to pay every month, that's what you pay. And you're just paying down their mortgage instead of them because you now own the house.
Yeah.
So when I say subject to, when I say it, I mean a deal in which the buyer is just taking over the underlying mortgage payments as they come.
Yeah.
The third type is what I call a wrap. And this is the situation that I gave in my first example.
Yeah, where it's a little bit of both you
Right.
combine.
There's a little bit of equity that's also being financed. And because there's equity being financed, you can't just simply take over the mortgage payments of the underlying mortgage because the payments aren't going to match up. There's more money owed to the seller. So in this situation, you have to negotiate the amount, the interest rate, late fees on your payments, when are payments due, all these other kinds of payment terms, because now you're creating a brand new mortgage with a different principal balance, different interest rate, different payments, but that includes the underlying mortgage payment in it.
So
And
with
that's why
all
I call it a wrap, because it's wrapping around a big one's
wrapping it
wrapping
all
around a little one.
together.
Yeah.
So with all three of these, you're going to use the same kind of all-inclusive trust deed.
In the
Or
first one, the true seller finance in the golden nugget, you're going to
Mhm.
use a regular note and deed
Okay,
because there's
because
no
it doesn't
underlying
need to
mortgage
cover.
to that it's subject to.
Right, right.
In the two other ones, yes, you will use an all-inclusive note and deed, and the reason that is because there's an underlying mortgage.
Okay, gotcha.
So when
Awesome.
there's an underlying mortgage, it's all-inclusive. When there's not, it's regular.
And then, so how do people legally and safely do these payments, right? Because like, who's tracking that? Who's like making sure these payments are made? You know, whether it's just the bank payment that needs to be made if it's like a true subject to, or if it's this hybrid wrap scenario. You
Right.
know, who's tracking all this and making sure that it's all the books are all clean on this? Because it
There's
could
a
get
couple of
hairy
ways
18 years down the road if no one's paying attention.
paying attention. That's right. There's two ways to do it. The first way, the recommended way, and the way I teach people to do it, is use a third party escrow company to handle the payments. Most states have companies, right? These are businesses, and their job is to essentially service loans. And in this case, they're going to service the all inclusive loan with the seller because the seller's not a bank. They don't know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So you hire this company, and the buyer makes payment to the escrow company. That escrow company then pays the underlying mortgage to make sure it got paid. And anything left over, if there is anything left over, then gets sent to the seller who's the
Mm-hmm.
lender on the wrap mortgage. So you've got a third party company that is, designed to do this kind of transaction. And not only will they accept payments and make payments out, but these companies will also do the tax reporting. Because at
Yeah,
the end
which
of
is
the
key.
year,
That's a key
you
benefit I think a lot of
key
people don't
benefit.
realize is like who's getting the tax benefits on
That's
these.
right. Remember, the buyer gets the mortgage interest deduction, right?
Hmm.
But you only get the mortgage interest deduction on a loan where you are the borrower. You're not the borrower on the underlying mortgage. The seller still is. And you're not going through the bank to assume it, right? You're not touching that
It's
mortgage.
not going in your name. Yeah.
And so the seller is the only one legally allowed to take that mortgage introduction deduction off their mortgage because their name is on it. But when you do the wrap note and deed, all inclusive, now you have a loan document where you are the named borrower, the seller's the
Mm.
lender, and now you get the interest deduction on that mortgage that you are now the borrower on.
So do you both get it? Do they still get it too? Because they're
The
paying on it.
seller gets the mortgage interest deduction on their underlying,
Uh huh.
okay, but the seller also has to claim your interest as income.
Ah, so it kind of negates each other.
So
So that
they wash out. So, and actually, the seller, if it's structured correctly, the seller is going to make more money than what is owed. Okay. But they're still going to get the interest deduction on their underlying mortgage because that's in their name and they're making that payment. And then they're going to pay taxes on the interest that they're earning because that's income to them. That's more money. And then the buyer gets the interest deduction on his all inclusive because that's where he's the named borrower. So he's going to get the deduction he would have otherwise gotten anyways. And it all works out in the end really beautifully. And these escrow companies will handle all of that for you. Typically, they are about 15 to $20 a month is what they cost. And they're absolutely worth it and highly recommended. That is the safest way to do it.
Yeah, I know that's what we did when we did the subject
Right.
to purchase you just helped me with. Yeah, we had a
Getting
company
them set up.
escrow specialists, and they just kind of take the payment,
They
you
take it
know?
over. The other way to do it is you could make the payment directly to the seller because he's the
Hmm.
bank. So you can
Yeah.
make the payment to him, but then you are trusting that
Yeah.
seller to take your money and first make their underlying mortgage payment.
Yeah.
Because if
And
they don't make that underlying mortgage payment, that bank can foreclose on you and you're going to lose the house. And the seller just took off with all your money.
yeah, and I've heard people sometimes will say, "Oh, well, you can just log into their account and make the payment straight to the bank," and which is safer because at
Mhm.
least you know it's the bank's being paid. But you have the issue of like what you just explained, like, but who's
Taxes.
getting the taxes? What about this? And also for the seller, how are they to prove that this loan is being fulfilled by a third party? You know,
Right.
because if they want to go qualify for another home,
It's a
they
huge
want
point.
to be able to show that the debt is serviced, that
That's right.
someone else is paying it, not them.
That's right.
And so having this third party that can just give you an end of the year statement for taxes and interest and
Yep.
who's
They'll
paying
calculate
what,
payoffs when you need them.
it's really really helpful just to
Yeah.
secure it as a good thing for both sides. And that's one thing. One, I'm going to ask you a silly question, but as an attorney, are subject to's legal?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Subject
that I
to
just want to get
are
that on the
legal.
statement. They're
There's
legal.
nothing
And number
illegal about
two,
buying a house subject to another mortgage.
right. And
But
number two is if you do it right, it can be safe and beneficial for both parties. It's
yeah,
not like this sketchy thing where you can take advantage of like a desperate seller. It's like if you do it right, there's really like very
it's a
little
win-win.
to no disadvantage for either parties if it's structured correctly. Would you agree
That's
with
right.
that?
Absolutely. It is absolutely a win-win, especially in markets, especially if a seller has a house that's not going to sell retail.
Hmm.
Maybe it's in such bad condition you can't get a loan on it. I actually, one of my very first flip projects, I went to a bank. They're like, sorry, this house is not in good enough shape for us to qualify for any kind of loan product. So
Mm.
the sellers would have had to do updating on the house, and I didn't know about hard money lenders, so I couldn't do the deal because the house was in poor shape. But seller financing can allow sellers to actually sell a house, even if it's in bad shape, even if they're underwater, even if there's very few buyers out there and interest rates are really high. It gives the sellers an option to actually sell their house.
And if they're smart, they can sell it at a premium, right?
Yeah,
Because right now people are buying down their interest rates. They're paying $5, 10, $15,000 to buy down these interest rates because they
yeah,
desperately want a lower interest rate. And a seller can say, "Hey, I'll sell it subject to. I'll leave the existing loan in my name, but
yeah,
you give me that extra 5, 10, 15,000 for buying it down."
yeah.
And
Or
then they
yeah, the
get
seller can
more than
say,
they could get.
yeah, I can add 20,000 onto my purchase price because I'm
Hmm.
going to finance it for you. It's great.
Yeah,
Um,
which
Sellers
is
can be a little
awesome.
scared because sellers they're not familiar with this. Like real estate investors, we learn this, we go to classes and we understand it. Your job as an investor is to help your seller understand the benefits of seller financing. And when
So
they
where
see
are the
it,
big
right,
risks? Legally as an attorney, and obviously you're not necessarily speaking as attorney on this podcast. You're just, giving your opinion. We can get rid of any disclaimers there. But what are the kind of the angles that like people should be aware of? Like maybe the top three like risky things that's like if you don't do this clean and legally, you
right,
could get bit in the butt. And this is how you do it, clean and legally,
yeah.
not just
The first
investor
risk
pitches.
is if there's an underlying mortgage, making sure that mortgage is paid on time. And an escrow company can help with that, going online and checking to make sure that payments are actually made. For example, I had a client who bought seller financing and then he turned around and sold on seller financing,
Mm,
keeping himself in the middle. So his buyers made a payment to him, he made a payment to the seller, original seller, and then the sellers made a payment to the bank. And they
yep.
used an escrow company to handle all of this. The escrow company, for some reason, we never found out why, stopped making the payment to the underlying mortgage.
Oh no.
Yeah, oh no. The bank found out. They found, obviously the note went into default. Then the bank looked up title and found the house had sold, and they called the note due immediately. And that could have been resolved if my client, who was in the middle of this transaction, had just checked the records, just got online and saw that the payment was being made. And if he didn't see a payment being made, he could have fixed it long before the loan went into default.
Mm,
So that payment getting made and keeping an eye on that is really, really important. So use an escrow company and get online access and confirm that these payments are being made. That's risk number one. Risk number two is the due on sale clause. All mortgages have an acceleration clause that says if the house is ever sold, the bank has the authority to call the note due and make you pay it off in 30 days.
If they want to. They don't have to.
They don't have to.
They have the right to.
They have the right to.
Yeah.
That's right. So if that happens, and if the bank finds out, they're going to send a letter to the original borrower, that's the seller in your transaction, and say, seller, we understand that you sold your house. That's great. Congratulations for selling your house. However, you didn't pay us off. So you have 30 days to pay us off. That's what the letter says. At that point, you can call the bank, you can negotiate that, maybe you get more time. The buyer can refinance the property, right? Pay it off that way with either a conventional loan or hard money loan. The seller can pay cash, or the buyer can pay cash to pay it off. The buyer can sell the house on the open market, right? If it's a good market, and then pay off the mortgage that way. And if none of those solutions work, then the final solution is you can restructure the deal, put title back into the seller's name, essentially give the house back to the seller, restructure the deal as a lease option, which gives you the right to possess the house and own it and have renters in there and all of that. And then you have an option date, where in 5 years that you have to actually buy the house and pay off the mortgage, no differently than your balloon payment on your wrap mortgage said you had 5 years to pay this off. Okay. And so you can just restructure the deal by putting the seller back on title and making it look like a lease option.
Have you heard about these executory contracts, something like that, where it's like you can put that on it, so even if you don't legally own it, you have control over?
Yeah, they're called contracts for deed.
Okay.
In the real estate world, they're called contracts for deed. They work like installment contracts. So it works like when you buy a car. When you buy a car at a dealer and you get a loan on it, when you buy the car, you walk out of the dealer with the car in your hand, you drive it away. But you don't walk away with the title certificate. You don't get ownership of the car. Where does the title go to? To the bank. Okay. The bank holds that title while you are making your payments. And when you make your last payment to the bank then sends you the title. And at that point, you get to own the car.
I thought that's how it worked with real estate originally. When I paid off my first home,
then you get it.
I'm like, where's my title? Do I get the title sent to me like I did with my car? And they're like,
you already have it.
They're like, you already own it. What are you talking about? Like, here's a statement saying it's paid for. But I
literally
didn't know that.
Deed, you don't own the house.
Right.
That's the difference. In a contract for deed, the seller keeps ownership of the house. You got this contract where you have to make monthly payments. You get to possess the house like you get to possess your car.
Well, that means you have the rights to control
the house. Yes, you have the rights to control the property, but you don't own it.
But it's not like they can just kick you out like a landlord saying, "Hey, never mind, we want to
get rid of you."
No, they can't kick
you out because it's not a lease agreement. It's an installment contract, and you actually have ownership rights in the house, so the seller cannot evict you. But the problem with these contracts for deed is, one, the seller stays on title. Mm-hmm. I don't want my seller staying on title to a house that I want to own, because if the seller's on title, what happens if he is sued?
Right.
That house is now going to be tied up in that lawsuit. What if the seller gets a divorce? The divorce is going to be tied up in the divorce hearing. What if the seller wants to get another mortgage and places another mortgage on the property that that you want to own one day?
And what if you want to sell it? Do you have any right to sell it when you have contracts for deed?
Because you don't own it. No, you have to work with the seller to own it. So financing, like let's say you have this contract for 5 years, and at the end of the 5 years, you have to pay it off in full. Well, how are you going to do that? You're going to have to turn it into a sale and go get a mortgage, a purchase mortgage, because you can't refinance it. You can only refinance properties that you actually own. So you have to buy it. I've heard that there are ways of refinancing if you show some that. So banks change their rules all the time. Their lending criteria changes all the time. But it can be difficult to get out of. It can be difficult you can't sell it without the sellers, working with the seller. For example, I had a case, and a client bought a house on seller financing and lived in it for 2 years, was supposed to live it for 5 years before he refinanced it. But after 2 years, he had a job change. He had to move to Texas. How does he get out of this contract? He's
And
got
this is like, is this a contract for deed, or did he
this is a
actually purchase
contract
it
for
and get it
deed.
put? So he didn't get the deed put in his name yet.
That's right.
Okay.
He has a contract for deed, so he can't sell the house. He doesn't want to go through the financing and pay it off because he's moving.
Right.
He would have to go somehow finance a house with one loan just to own it, then turn around and sell it. That's a lot of expense and time just to be able to sell a house. So he was stuck. He was literally stuck. He had to move, and he could not get rid of this property. And we ended up having to redo title a little bit. He got a private lender who would loan, and most hard money lenders will not loan to people who own homes in their individual name or want to own in their individual name. There's licensing rules. But we did find a lender that would essentially provide him the cash to pay off the mortgage and buy his way out of this contract for deed early. And that cost him an extra $15,000.
Yeah.
Just to get out of this contract so he could move. So I'm not a fan of those installment contracts, those contracts for deed. They still trigger the due on sale clause. Some people that talk about these contracts for deed say, oh, well, it doesn't trigger the due on sale clause. Yes, it does. It's still a trigger. But
even though the ownership
hasn't changed hands, it's not as big a red flag. That's how they kind of talk about this contract for deed, is because title stays in the seller's name, the bank is less likely to find out that it's been sold on terms, contract for deed.
Because I think there's the phrasing in it says something about ownership interest or something. So it's like, even though the title hasn't officially changed,
possession.
The contract deed is ownership interest. Now you have interest in the property.
If you give away permanent possession of the house, which is what these contracts for deed do, it's permanently giving the house to somebody else while it's paid off. That triggers the due on sale clause.
So what's the difference between a lease option and a contract for deed?
Okay. A contract for deed is like an installment contract when you buy a car, right? You get the car and you make payments to the bank, and upon your last payment, you get title. Same thing with real estate. You buy the house, you get to possess the house, you make payments to the seller, and when you make your last payment, then you get on title. A lease option is somewhere in between that and a purchase, where you actually buy the house with like an all-inclusive note and deed. So the seller stays on title. The seller becomes a landlord, not a bank.
Mm-hmm.
The seller leases the home to you so that you have possessory rights. You can rent the house out. Typically, the seller will lease it to you on what we call a master lease. So if you're a landlord, you're probably familiar with a regular lease agreement that all your tenants sign. And that lease says that the tenants cannot sublet the house, right? Because you as a landlord don't want somebody else in the house that you don't know. So your tenants cannot sublet the house. But in a master lease, you as the tenant are allowed to sublet the house. So I sign a master lease with the seller because I don't need a place to live, right? I have a house. I want a rental property. So I lease the house at $1,000 a month from the seller, and then I turn around and I lease it out to a tenant for $1,300 a month. So what have I just done? I've created $300 a month cash flow for me for a house I don't even own. And then you can couple that lease that lease with an option to buy in 5 years in the future.
Right.
So currently, I'm a tenant, and I have a lease agreement. I'm just paying my rent, right? And I'm subletting to somebody else. But in 5 years, I have the right to buy the house if I want, and I paid an option fee to keep that open for me. So,
and they legally have to sell that to you, even if the market blew up and now the home's worth $200,000 more. They have to legally sell it to you if you want it. And and correct me if I'm wrong, but depending on how you structure that deal, it could say they have to sell it to you at a certain price, or it could say they sell it to you at the going market rate, or
right.
you can kind of decide how you structure that originally.
Yeah.
But if you got it locked in at a price 3 years ago and then it goes up when you're ready to sell, whether they like it or not, that's your call. You can just sell it and take the difference.
Yeah, when you sign that option up front, you need to have some kind of deadline, like date by which you exercise your option. You can't leave it open-ended forever.
Right.
Typically, it's 3 to 5 years. That's just what's most common. But it could be 20 years or 30 years, but it has to have some deadline in which you have to buy the house. And it must state either what the price is going to be or a way to actually calculate the price.
like the
Can't
going
be,
market rate or
yeah,
something.
going market rate or the current value plus 3% a year. Like we're just going to appreciate the house 3% a
Some way
year.
to calculate it.
Yeah, as long as there's some way to calculate the price, then the seller's obligated to sell you at whatever you've calculated.
I love it, man. So many things we could cover. This is super valuable. So going back to the subject too, is just because that's kind of what
Right.
my mindset having you come on, even though you obviously could talk about anything. Um, so let's talk about insurance. So that was one thing that was a little tricky for me when I was like, okay, what's the nitty gritty of how do I do the insurance on this thing? Because
Okay.
insurance is tied up in escrow, and if we're canceling escrows and switching names and insurance, that could red flag the bank and cause issues there. But I
Yep.
also want to make sure if there's if there's an issue, my house catches on fire or something,
You
that I
want
have
insurance.
insurance that will actually work.
Right.
So how do you handle insurance? I know there's two different main ways,
Yeah.
but what's your thoughts on that?
You have to remember that banks always demand that you have insurance on the property
Hmm.
because it protects their collateral, right? If
Right.
the house burns down, they've lost the collateral and they can't collect. So the bank wants to confirm always that you have an insurance policy. Most Americans, anyways, roll in that insurance payment into their monthly escrow payment to the bank, and then the bank pays the insurance company at renewal time. That way, the bank knows it's getting paid. So the
Hmm.
first thing you need to do in a seller financing transaction is confirm if the taxes and insurance are being escrowed into the monthly payment on the underlying mortgage, right? 95% of them are. It's just the way
Hmm.
Americans do it. Okay.
Yep.
It's just our habit. If that's,
Especially if this was someone's primary residence.
yeah,
The
so
only
it's
time I've
primary
not had it
residence.
that way is like a small investment loan from like a small bank for some investment property. They
Right.
might not wrap it in.
Right.
But if
And
it's someone's primary conventional loan, it's always going to
it's
be
almost
wrapped
there. Yeah. And some banks, when you buy a house, they'll actually give you the option,
in.
right? Do you want this escrowed in or do you want to pay it directly yourself? But most Americans choose to have it escrowed in because
Yeah,
it's automatically done.
it's easy.
And here's what happened because the bank is so concerned about that insurance policy. If the seller makes any changes to their insurance policy or cancels their policy,
Yeah.
that insurance company, the first thing they're going to do is notify the bank and say, here's what's changed, here's it's canceled, whatever. So don't make any changes to the seller's insurance policy. Just leave it as is, leave it
Hmm.
in place. It's going to be paid along with the escrows. That's totally fine. And the seller's got insurance if they ever need it. Then what you do as the investor buyer is you go get your own insurance policy that you pay directly to your insurance company so that in the event there is a fire or flood, you can call your insurance agent, call in your policy, and you can get the money to fix the house. And you don't have to go to the seller, their agent, their company, or notify the bank that the house has even burned down because that
Yeah.
insurance policy is not even going to be touched. You've got another policy that's going to take care of everything.
Yeah, and that's how we ended up doing it, because I had heard, and that one thing I learned with this, I'll just say, like, as an attorney, I'm like, oh, he's gonna have all the answers of the way, the only right way to
No,
do it. And as the more you learn in real estate and in life,
there's a
there's
million ways to do
so
it.
many different ways, right? There's all these different opinions, and
Yep,
every state has different laws, and those laws are continually changing.
yep,
And there's, this one has this risk reward, this has this risk
that's
reward,
right.
and there's different strategies and opinions and perspectives and views. And I'd heard ways where you could, you could cancel that insurance and put the new one on, and they won't do it, and this and that. But I really liked your strategy. At the end of the day, it just seemed easy and cheap, and insurance isn't that much. I mean, it's
No,
like
800
$600 a
bucks a
year.
year.
It's like,
Yeah.
it's worth it to just keep it super clean and keep everybody
And
happy.
that's the way we've done it for 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
It's only been recently that investors always try to find another way to skin the cat. They want a
Hmm.
cheaper way, an easier way, a faster way, a better way. Always. We're always looking for a better way to
Right.
do a deal. And I get clients, oh, well, I'll just add my name as an additional insured on the seller's
Hmm.
policy. Because then I don't have to
Right.
pay for my own. I'm saving 800 bucks a year
Or start a new policy with my name as the primary and the seller as the additional
or
insured, so their
something.
name's still on there. You
Because then
know.
you're changing insurances, you're adding people. That's all going to get notified to the bank. So do
Hmm.
you want to clue in the bank now that it may have sold, or would you rather the bank maybe find out when you actually have a problem?
Yeah.
I'd rather the bank not know anything right now, right? If I have a problem and I had to call on my insurance policy, maybe the bank will never even find out. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but at least I have the option of doing it without involving the bank. But
Yeah.
if I name myself as an insured on that policy of the sellers, and that's the insurance policy we call it, that insurance company is going to notify the bank that the house burned down.
Yeah.
Now they know that the collateral's gone and they're going to start looking at things. I don't want
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and if they do get red flagged on anything, I'd rather have them find out 5 or 10 years from now. Where let's say
And
they
it's
do a
safe.
due on sale 10 years from now. One, I've got a ton of equity to help me exit however I want to
Uh-huh.
exit. Or two, I could even go to the bank and say, look, here's 10 years of non-missed payments from this that I made. You can see through the third-party escrow
Right.
specialist. And they might make an exception, be like, all right, we'll leave it in place. You obviously are trustworthy. Even if I don't necessarily qualify for a whole new loan, they might make an exception, just leave it in place because there's 10 years of proof that it's
Yeah.
good. They might not, but it's
Yeah,
better
yeah,
than
but
the
at least
month you
it's an
close.
option. It's a
Yeah.
possibility, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
But
I
if,
mean,
if they red flag right away the month you close, it's like there's too many question marks. It's too weird. And they
yeah,
just want to be safe.
yeah. And my philosophy on seller financing is do everything you can to reduce the red flags that the bank might find out,
Yeah.
and then just live your life, and then have an
And
extra strategy.
And that's legal, though. I mean, is that not considered deception in like the attorney legal world? It's like, well, if it's legal, why can't you tell the bank? Why are we hiding things? That's not
No, I
illegal to
just don't
hide
want them to
things.
know. But once they do know, if once they do know, at this point, you need to be very careful in how you communicate with that bank.
Mm,
Don't at that point do not misrepresent the transaction. I've got clients who come up with all these creative ways of using trust and writing the trusts that make it look like it's the seller's trust, and then they're going to provide the trust to the bank to make the bank think that the seller does still own the property when they don't. No, at that point you're talking loan fraud, and that's criminal, and you can go to prison.
So what
So,
if you did that before the bank found out, though? Because a lot of people do talk about, ooh, put it in a trust and this
oh,
and
you can
way.
put it into a trust. Don't make that trust appear on its face like it belongs to the seller,
Mm,
because it doesn't. The trust doesn't belong to the seller. It's the buyer's entity. It's the buyer's trust. It's the way the buyer holds title, and that's totally fine. But when you make it look like it's sellers, and then the bank finds out that maybe the house sold, and the bank goes, "Hey, we see your house is titled in a trust. We need a copy of that trust document so we can confirm who owns the house." Then they provide the trust document, which still lists the seller as the owner of that trust. That's fraud, because the seller doesn't own that trust anymore. The buyer does,
oh, right.
through a separate document. And they're just not going to provide that other document to the bank, so the bank doesn't know that that trust has been assigned to somebody else. That to me is a non-starter. That's to me that's considered loan fraud.
Yeah, and I remember when we were discussing mine, that's originally what I had heard to do from my investigation. You were like, not a good idea.
Yeah,
And one thing I found that was interesting though is too, and one reason I didn't want to do a trust at all, regardless of who was on it, is then the name's all over it too, right?
yeah,
And then my name's on it because we could put an LLC
mm-hmm.
that my name's not on,
Right.
Or it's like a blind LLC, and then my name's not all over it. When in Utah, like say the trust is going to list my name right there on the closing
As
document,
a trustee, right?
and so in Utah, at least, it just didn't make any sense for me to do it that way. I felt like was
No,
either
and
just put it in an LLC,
in my experience, banks don't look at title.
right?
Banks aren't randomly going through their loan list and going, "Oh, let's see if Jeff sold his house," and go look at title. Right. The only way they're going to look that up is if they're given a reason to look
Mm.
it up. Those are the red flags that I talked about. If you eliminate the red flags, the bank never has a reason to look it up, and they're never going
Missed
to know.
payment, change in insurance. What
Insurance,
else would cause a bank to look into
other
it?
communications with the bank. Because remember, let's say something happens and the buyer needs to talk to the bank about the loan. Well, the bank won't talk to you because you're not on the loan. So at closing, typically we'll give the buyer a power of attorney just in case, so that they
Mhm.
can talk to the bank. But the second you submit that to the bank's gonna go, why is this guy Jeff with talking to us about this loan through a power of attorney? where are my borrowers? Where are the people who actually got this loan out? That's, what happened to them. So the bank will start asking questions. And so you better have good answers.
So maybe get that document signed, but don't submit it to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bank until
Your
you
goal is to not
necessarily.
use it, but you have it if you need it.
But it could be 3 years from now, 5 years from
That's
now, that
right.
if you have to talk about something important, you can give them that document. But don't
Right.
just submit it. Don't just tell, like,
Yeah,
red
don't
flag
automatically
anything.
submit and say, "Hey, I got this power of attorney, so I'm going to call you in the future." Right? No, just use it when you need it, if you ever do.
Yeah, and the easiest way with everything being online is if you can get the login information,
Yes.
then you can access the bank. You can check those payments, like we talked about
You get
earlier, make
copies
sure
of
they're
your
being
note.
made.
You can submit
Well, and
requests and problems and get answers. You can go to the chat function, and they'll think you're just the borrower chatting.
I needed it right away. What happened with me is there was some miscommunication with the escrow specialist company of the October payment, the month that we closed. I had already called into the bank with the seller and caught up the payments, the past due payments, and even made the October payment.
Uh,
The escrow company didn't know that I'd made the October payment. And so they sent me an invoice, hey, you need to make your October payment. And I called them like, no, that's been paid. They're like, well, we don't have proof of that. And so luckily I had the login information. I was able to log in, download the most recent bank statements, send it to the escrow specialist so they could see that it's all caught up. So everybody was protected. But if I didn't have that bank information, I would have been calling the seller. Hey, can you show them
yeah,
that
or
it's
can
good
you
for
call the bank?
October?
Can we get on the phone together? And
Yeah, and it was just so much cleaner and easier that I had that login info because I just get on and
yeah,
download the most recent bank
yeah,
statement, and now
that's
I can
that's a
always make
huge
sure that
benefit. If you can,
yeah,
if the bank has an online portal and you can convince the sellers to give you access, and you can come up with a password that you both know that's not either one of your main passwords, right? The sellers
hmm
can change the password to something
sure,
new, and then both have access.
yeah,
Works great.
absolutely. You could probably even update the email address and everything so you become the
And
new
mailing
notifier.
address you can up online, so that way if the note is called due, that letter is going to go to you and not the seller.
Yeah. Yeah, so many different key things. Man, I can't believe it's almost already been an hour. I'm like, let's just do this for 3 more hours.
Then I would
But
charge
no, I
you.
appreciate your time, and I don't want to eat all of it up. Any other key things you'd want to mention with subject to seller financing or really anything else real estate related on the legal side of kind of like, hey,
Yeah,
these are a few things people don't always think about, not just the investor side. I know you know a ton about that. I'd love to talk more there, but kind of the legal, like, be aware of this. This is a bigger deal than you might
yeah.
realize.
I think the biggest tip I could give regarding that is close out a title company where an
Yes.
attorney is drafting your all-inclusive note deed or your loan documents.
And let me just give a shout out for that. That was one of the most exciting things when I found you. I was like, wait, this guy is an attorney. He's done these himself personally.
Yeah, I
He
have.
knows what I'm talking about. And he owns the title company that it's so it can all be done in one place. Because I
In-house
was going with another title company that my friend owned and I trust him, but he was not familiar with
with the
subject
documents.
twos. And I was like, I really want someone that knows all of it. And it was great having the attorney, the title company, all that in one place with you, with REI Title and Breglio Law, all in one place. It just made it so much cleaner, so much smoother,
Thank you.
and cheaper too. I didn't have to hire an outside attorney and then still pay the title company fees. And like by doing them all separate, doing it all in one was awesome.
Right. And you'll find that a lot of title companies will. I've had this complaint my entire career. There are escrow officers who will create note and deeds. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
to me, they're practicing law without a license. And I
Mm.
don't know why the state allows escrow officers to do this. I just don't think they've looked at it. But when other escrow officers create these note and deeds, it's a one-page note. There's like two blank lines, and they just fill in a couple of blanks, and that's it. Um, it's great. It will get you closed. It'll get you through the closing, and this escrow officer will make his or her money. But if there's any problems down the road, that's a terrible note, and you're going to have a lot of problems. You
Mm.
need really good loan documents that were created and drafted by an attorney, not an escrow officer.
Do you practice just in Utah?
Yeah.
Okay, so any Utah listeners, Jeff's the man. What's the best place for people to reach you? I know it's probably your website. You have an
Yeah.
awesome website.
Yeah. reimasteryu.com.
Yep, and that's the letter U, like
Like
university.
university,
REI
my
Master
educational
U.
website, but my legal products are there. You can get help from me there. You can book time with me there. All my classes are listed there. If you want to take classes, they're online. I teach all over the country. I have students from all 50, not all 50 states, but a lot of states that join me on webinars and some of my other educational opportunities.
Yeah, awesome resource for those just wanting to learn more. But then again, like I said, if they actually want to use you for transactions, you're right there as well. Which I had a great experience, and the people who referred me, they highly recommended you, and I'm glad they did because it was honestly hard to find. I called a lot of places,
Yeah,
and I'd call real estate specific attorneys, and they just didn't really know what I was talking about. But not everybody's done 5,000 deals. Not everybody's been doing this for 24 years. And I always say, like, the person that's done it personally is so different. Even if you had done this a million times, but you had never done it, you never bought real estate yourself, you
yourself.
never sold real estate, you never done these structures as an investor, there's just something missing.
Yeah.
And you being on all those different sides was really just comforting, and I can see
We're good.
why people recommend you so
Right.
highly.
And that's a good word of advice for all of the professionals you hire: insurance agents,
Absolutely.
real estate agents, property managers, even contract. Find service providers who are also investors and have owned property themselves. They'll be far better at what they do than anybody else because they're going to see it from your perspective.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I love that. I think that's great
Yeah,
advice.
CPAs,
And
bookkeepers, all of them. Get people with experience in your industry.
And if they don't, just take note of that and be
Yeah.
aware. It's like, okay, this agent, I'm good. They might be good at
I might have
their
to teach
closing
my
docs,
agent some things.
but I'm not going to take investment advice from them just when it comes to
Yeah,
getting the closing done. Like
right,
that, they know what they know, but I'm not going to take advice on what they don't
right.
know. I love that. Well, Jeff, this is awesome. I'd love to have you on next year again
Love it.
and pick your brain some more. I have some final 4 questions I'd like to ask all the guests, and you might have got a email telling you what they are, so you'd be prepared. But I just switched them up, so we're going to blindside you with new questions.
I'm good with it.
Great. All right. So, question number 1, Jeff, what is your dream deal or type of investment you'd like to tackle eventually?
I mean, one I have not done yet.
One you haven't done yet, or you could share your dream deal if you've already done it. Just some dream investment.
Well, my dream deals were small multifamily picked up through seller finance. I've got some smaller multifamily. One, I'm a limited partner in a syndication, and my other one I actually paid cash for, and now I'm doing a cash out refinance. So it'll be financed traditionally. So I'd like to pick up a smaller, like 6 to 12 unit apartment complex on seller financing terms.
There you go. I love it. All right. Question number 2. What has been one of the most pivotal books you've ever read?
I'm going to give you the book I just finished, and it's going to knock. I am so over all those 10x and how to win friends and influence people and how to grow your business and how. I'm done with all of that.
Okay.
It's the book that I thought was absolutely brilliant, and it was fun and a short, easy read, and it's called Look Out for the Little Guy by Scott Lang.
Okay.
Do you know who
Look
Scott
out
Lang
for the
is?
little guy, Scott Lang. I recognize the name. Who's Scott Lang?
It's Ant-Man.
Okay.
Scott Lang's the character of Ant-Man. And Paul Rudd, who's the actor, with another writer, actually wrote a book in the voice of Ant-Man.
All right.
Called Look Out for the Little Guy. But it's full of beautiful little life tips to make your life better.
I love it.
And
I love it.
It's a quick little easy read. So Look Out for the Little Guy by Scott Lang. Fun book.
Audio or text?
I think it's just in book right now.
Okay.
I'm a reader. I don't do books on tape. I
Mm.
hold it in my hand with a pen or pencil that I can take notes.
You're showing your age, Jeff.
I am
Kids
showing
nowadays
my
don't know
age.
how to read and write.
But there's a reason. There's a reason why you should read with an actual book in your hand, not listen to it.
What is that?
Concentration and really understanding the words. When you listen to a book on tape, you're probably going to be doing something else. And it's going to be background. And it's going to be, you're going to listen, you're going to pick up nuggets. It's going to be okay. But if you read it with a pen and take notes and underline things, you'll get much more out of the book, and it'll be much more meaningful to you.
Wide words of wisdom. I like
I'm
that.
an old guy.
I like it. I think it should be utilized, especially, there's some books, it's okay if it's background, but there's some books, if you really want to internalize it, I think there's power in that.
Yep.
Okay, question number 3.
Okay.
What is one of the most expensive or interesting mistakes you've made in real estate investing?
Okay.
And I say mistakes in air quotes because
you are doing air quotes. I've made lots, and I teach my mistakes. It's one of my biggest, one of my most popular classes are like the 10 biggest mistakes I've made.
There you go.
Learn from other people. I didn't learn early enough the power of buy and hold. I bought a duplex south of a university with student housing. I bought it for $170,000 in the early 2000s. I bought it with conventional financing, so I had a 30-year fixed mortgage. I was cash flowing $1,800 a month.
Yeah.
And after I got it remodeled and rented out and stabilized, I got an offer for about $225,000. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to make $50,000. This was 25 years ago. I had never made a check of $25,000 in one sitting. I'm like, oh my gosh, $50,000. Wow. I want that. So I sold. That house that I sold for $225,000 is now worth well over $1 million. Okay. And I would be cash flowing $5,000, $6,000 a month.
And you could have refinanced 5 times and pulled out hundreds of thousands along the way.
Yep. And it's still there. I still drive by it on occasion. I still see it. And I'm like, damn it, I had that house.
I have a duplex with almost that exact same story down here in St. George that I bought, held on to it less than a year. And a real estate agent called me like, hey, do you want to sell that? I'm like, no. He's like, well, would you? I'm like, if I can make this much, I guess. Yeah. I knew nothing about real estate investing, knew nothing about the market. I didn't even look at what the going rate was. But he's like, yeah, I could get you a seller for that. And I made like $70,000 in less than a year. And I was stoked.
That's awesome.
That's genius, right? And I didn't even rehab it. I didn't even
you're 15 years down the road and you go, wait a minute. What could I have done and made a better decision?
Learn that lesson.
Yeah. And then you got the tax advantages over all those years, the depreciation. I mean, yeah. Power, we all have our needs. Like some people have to do flips because they need the cash, right? They need cash flow to pay their living expenses. Don't underestimate the power of buy and holds.
I love it. I think that's super powerful. That's my passion with real estate as well. I think it's something different and unique than making money. If you make money, what are you going to do with it, right? But if you have this wealth that's going to continually grow and continually feed you, it's like, you're literally killing the golden goose when you sell the asset.
Yes, you are.
And it's like, just feed that goose. Don't get rid of it.
Yep, agreed.
But it can be tempting. All right. So last question then. If you could pull out your phone, write a text message to the world, and everybody's phone's going to go off and they get a message from Jeff Breglio, what's it going to say?
Breathe. Maybe stop and breathe. Just stop. We convince ourselves that we always have to be doing. We forget that we are human beings, not human doings. So just stop and breathe and be for a few minutes a day. Just let everything else just drop, disappear, and just be for a little while every day.
Jeff, this is awesome. I think that's a great note to end it on. Thank you so much for your time. If you're ever down in St. George, hit me up.
Oh, I will.
Hopefully we'll do many more deals together. I got a new house thanks to you down here. You can come stay.
Good. And you know what? My clients are starting to hit St. George and Hurricane.
Oh, yeah.
And you got the market. Salt Lake Valley, Provo, if you're for your local listeners, Provo, Salt Lake, and Davis counties, man, we're priced out. There's really no rental properties. You can still do some flips, but you're in the next area.
Yeah, it's growing like crazy down here. It's insane.
Cool.
But this is great, man. I appreciate it. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Sure thing. Thanks, Joe. And just let me know when you want me back.
Absolutely. This is Joe Jensen signing off for the Real Estate Investing School podcast, reminding you to learn what to do, then do it.